Hi friends, sorry I missed yesterday. Our Zoom meeting just took it out of me, but I'm here to read chapter 24 of Coyote Sunrise. Petoskey, Michigan came just too darn soon. Petoskey, Michigan wasn't just a city or a dot on the map or even a waiting to ya. Petoskey, Michigan was a goodbye. Nothing personal against the good people of Petoskey, but by the time I got to Petoskey, I hated Petoskey. I thought I'd never fall asleep the night before, but next thing I knew, I was blinking my eyes awake and the sun was rising. I could just feel in the air that we were deep in Michigan, and I hated it. I yawned and then scowled at the sunlight. Ivan was lying next to me, blinking his sleepy blue eyes at me. Well, no sense in dragging this out, amigo. Time to tear off the Band-Aid, I guess. Ivan just yawned at me, so I got up and walked out through my curtain. Lester was heroically still up behind the wheel, and Rodeo was snoring in his blanket pile, and Miss Vega was asleep on the couch. Salvador was awake, though, sitting in the chair across from the couch, reading the dog-eared copy of The One and Only Ivan I'd given him the night before. He looked up at me when I walked out, and then away real quick, so I knew he kind of felt the same way I did. Maybe. I clenched my jaw and walked up to him. "Hey," I said, and he said hey back. And I leaned down to look at the pine trees whizzing by the window that looked distinctly like Michigander pine trees, I said. "Where are we exactly?" And Salvador shrugged and then said, "Lester said we're like an hour away, about half an hour ago." And I said, "Oh, cool." A few seconds passed, and then I said, "Hey, I don't do goodbyes, all right? You're cool and we're kind of friends and we're dropping you off, and that's fine. When we get there, could you just grab your stuff and hop on down? I don't want to say goodbye. It's easier that way, okay?" This was a lesson I'd learned the hard way from all the times I'd almost made friends with some kid in a campground or hotel or city park or public library, and then we'd left him behind. I know goodbyes, and the best goodbyes are the ones you don't say out loud. Salvador blinked at me. "Okay." And I started to walk away toward the front of the bus, but Salvador said, "Wait." And then he handed me a folded piece of paper. I took it and walked away and plopped into a seat by Lester and opened it up, and all it had written on it were the words, "Your friend Salvador," and a phone number. I held the paper in my hand and looked out the window, some weird version of a smile on my face. I'll give it to Salvador. He was totally good about honoring requests from kind friends. The drop went just like I'd asked. There was a phone call with his aunt to find out where she was, and then Salvador and his mom bustled around gathering up all their stuff. At one point, Salvador came up to me with my copy of The One and Only Ivan, and I said, "Keep it." But other than that, I kept my eyes on the pages of the book I was reading. And then we were there. We met his aunt at a restaurant next to the hotel she was staying in. We pulled into the parking lot, and Salvador and his mom got all excited when they saw her through the window, sitting in a booth. I kept reading, my hand scratching at Ivan's furry back. There were some goodbyes, but none for me. Rodeo and Lester wished them well and helped them unload their suitcases and stuff, and there were probably some hugs and whatnot, but I wasn't really paying attention. Rodeo and Lester climbed back aboard, and the door shut, and I accidentally looked up a little and saw, through the restaurant windows, Salvador's aunt jump up when he and Miss Vega walked into the restaurant, and there was some more hugging and what looked like a lot of excited talking. Reuniting with family must be nice. I put my nose back in my book. Rodeo eased down into the driver's seat and looked at me for a second before asking, "How you doing, Sugar Plum?" And I just said, "Get this pile of junk moving, old man." Without even looking up from my book, but out of the corner of my eye, I saw him nod, and then the engine fired up, and we were off. I did sneak one more peek, though, just one quick glance out the window, since I had to clear my throat anyway. Miss Vega was talking with her sister. They were holding both of each other's hands and looking right into each other's eyes, talking close and nodding, the way sisters do. Salvador was standing next to them. He was standing there in the restaurant holding that dirty old hubcap under one arm. He was looking at me, and his other arm was raised in a wave. My book was way more interesting than saying goodbye to any dumb boy holding a stupid hubcap. Come on, Coyote. It sucked. It really, really sucked. Not the book. The saying goodbye to the stupid boy. That sucked. I blinked and I flared my nostrils and I clenched my teeth and I reminded myself that it was all right, that I was all right, that everything was all right. "Hey there, sweet Daisy," Rodeo called out as we rumbled back toward the street. "Give me a once upon a time." I closed my book and took one big old heart-cleaning, mind-clearing breath and threw something like a smile onto my face. That was the thing to do, I knew. That was how we rolled, I guessed. "Once upon a time," I began, "there was a horse." Ooh, I love horse stories. Hit me, kid. I could see that Lester was watching me from the seat across the aisle. I didn't feel like being watched. I set my book down and leaned my forehead against the window. Well, she was a fierce horse. Always swore that no person would ever ride her. She galloped across the prairie alone, mane and tail whipping in the wind. She was free, I swallowed, looking hard for some sparkle to put into my voice. I couldn't quite find it. "All right," Rodeo coaxed, and then I breathed in, breathed out. The bus felt so empty around me, I couldn't hardly concentrate at all. And then one night she was running along and an owl flew along beside her. And he looked down at her. She was racing her shadow in the moonlight. "Oh yeah, killer image, Coyote." And the owl said, he said, well, he asked her, what'd he ask her? I looked up at Rodeo. He was drumming his fingers on the steering wheel, bobbing his head, moving in his seat a little. There was a little smile on his face. He was always like that when we got moving again. I stared at him. I'd made a friend, and we'd just left him behind. We just left him behind. Now I was all alone again. Rodeo knew all that. He knew every bit of it, and he was sitting up there smiling and bouncing in his seat and bopping his head to the music. "What'd he ask her?" he said again. "Are you happy?" I asked him. My voice was raspy when I said it, kind of whispery and hoarse. I don't know why. Rodeo stopped drumming and bouncing. He looked back at me. His forehead crinkled. "Why'd he ask her that?" he said. I opened my mouth, but before I could answer, Lester interrupted. "Hey, hold up, man. Something's up." I followed Lester's pointing finger and saw him. Salvador running after us across the parking lot, still holding that stupid hubcap in one hand. He was sprinting and waving his free arm at us. Rodeo pumped the brakes, and we eased to a stop, and Salvador came huffing up to us. My heart was doing something crazy in my chest, but I ignored it and jumped up and was standing on the steps when Rodeo swung open the door. Salvador was standing there, chest heaving. "Hey," he said between gasps, and I couldn't read his face. It looked kind of mad, but not at me, and kind of excited, but not necessarily in a super happy way. So I said, what's up?" He squinted at me sideways and said, "Can we get a ride?" My heart dropped because, without even realizing it, something like hope had sprung up inside me when Salvador had come running. But it died again with that stupid question. I thought he was coming back, but all he needed was a ride to their hotel or something. "Oh, sure. Where to?" Salvador shook his head. "You're not going to believe it," he said. And I said, "Okay, where?" And he shook his head and looked away, and then looked back at me, and he kind of smiled with one side of his mouth and said, "You ever heard of Yakima, Washington?" I'd like to say I was all cool about it, but nah, not really. Come on, Coyote, not even close. I whooped so hard it hurt my throat a little, and I jumped down to give that Salvador a big ol' hello again and welcome back hug that darn near knocked him down. Turns out I was wrong about Petoskey, Michigan. I kind of love it. As it turns out, I was wrong about goodbyes too. The best kind of goodbye is the kind where you don't actually have to leave the person behind. Well, that's where we're going to stop today with our chapter. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoy following along with our read aloud, and I'll see you again tomorrow. Bye, guys.